First of all, I'd just like to thank sincerely BTU for hosting me. I'd like to also thank Rabbi Leslie, who's had to dash away for emergency, just whispered to me. I'd certainly like to express my gratitude to the sponsors. And as we heard, the shir is dedicated for a little boy who needs a little, or as I would say, a wee bit more help in achieving his, I've become disconnected. Achieving his full potential, and we should all, of course, join together in expressing our sincere hope that Hashem will make that happen quickly. Also, of course, have to give thanks to Chazaq, who very kindly are partners in tonight's event, and who I have the great pleasure and privilege of speaking for very often. In case you don't know, I'm sure you do, but their work is sincere, honest, successful and passionate, and it's always a pleasure to be with them and to speak for them. Have I thought, and we're being videoed by Torah Anytime, and Torah Anytime turns an audience of 50 or 100 into an audience of 5,000 or 10,000, and an audience of 1,000 into 50,000, so thanks to them for videoing us tonight. Hello. I wanted to call this particularly as the theme, which I've been asked to emphasize, is speech and talking. I wanted to call it Talking Up the Churban, talking up the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. So I'll explain to you in a second exactly what I mean by that. True story. Oh, incidentally, are you understanding me? Have you got me? Good, because as Americans like to say to me, you have an accent. So do you! But it's just that my accent is, might be, I'm just making sure. You sure? Because I can give the rest of the talk like that if you'd prefer. Okay? 2 years ago, I was in London speaking for a wonderful organization, Camp Simcha, which deals retreats for families who've got children who are very, very not well. They've two retreats, one for parents of children with cancer, and one for parents with children who've got worse diseases than cancer. So I was there speaking for the latter camp. And I went to see a very, very dear friend of mine beforehand. Himself has not been well at that time. Baruch Hashem has had a complete recovery. And he told me a story which I thought was so very apropos for our theme tonight, and very important. In fact, I said this in California a few weeks ago, and somebody said to me afterwards something which I've heard to be the reaction whenever I've told this story. This is life-changing. So you ready? A life-changing story. True story. There was a Hasidic Rabbi. Now, whenever you say that, it's not a true story, but this is a true story, okay? The Hasidic Shamaisa, the Hasidic story is actually true. There was a Hasidic Rabbi, probably still is. Can't remember the name. I did look it up. Hasidic Rabbi, and he had a Chosid, of course, and the Chosid had a problem. The Chosid problem was he had a terrible, uncontrollable temper. I believe the American phrase these days is he was a rageaholic. Is that the phrase? Now, he was a nice guy. He wasn't a bad person. It's just that he had an uncontrollable temper. And when he lost it, it was like thermonuclear explosion. Everybody was damaged by the fallout. His wife was damaged. His children were damaged. His neighbors, the people who worked for him. And he regretted it immediately. I mean, he was a good person. He just couldn't control his temper. So of course, if you're a Chassid with a problem, what are you going to do? Go and see the Rebbe. So he went to see his Rebbe, big fellow, and came to see the Rebbe, and he's pouring his heart out to the Rebbe and explaining how much he regrets this. It's just, he can't do anything about it. It just keeps happening. And the Rebbe sat stroking his long beard, and he said, look, this indeed is a very serious problem. I want to make sure I give you the right advice. So, give me 10 minutes, just go outside my room. There's a chair just in the hallway outside. Sit in the chair. Give me 10 minutes to think about this. And then come back in. Anyway, so out goes the big Chassid, and he sits in the chair. And when the Rebbe's assistant, his shamus, sees the fellow's going outside, the shamus, who's a little fellow, comes in. And he opens the door and he says to the Rebbe, Rebbe, willst du haben a glass tea? Would you like a cup of tea, a cafe, a cup of coffee? And the Rebbe said, Kim tarein, come here. So the fellow comes in, closes the door, he says, that fellow sitting outside, that chassid of mine, he has a very serious problem. He's got a terrible temper. And I want to give him the best possible advice to solve this problem of his temper. But in order to do so, I have to get a feel of what this temper is like. So go out and provoke him. Go and get him to lose his temper. And the Shammai says, He said, go. Do you speak Yiddish? Go and get him to lose his temper. Well, the Rabbi says. So the little chassid, the little shamus, goes out past the big chassid with the temper, and he sort of nods at him. He nods back, and he goes into the kitchen and prepares a tray with coffee, hot coffee, and milk, sugar, cookies, and he walks out, walking towards the Rebbe, and he walks past the big chassid. He pretends to trip and spills the entire contents of the tray over the chassid with the temper. And the chassid jumps up and goes, Daigenish. Don't worry. Could happen to anybody. Supposed to get him to lose his temper. So the Rebbe says, get him to lose his temper. So the shaman says, if you hadn't stuck your great big feet out, I wouldn't have tripped over them. Which he hadn't done. And the chassid said, you know, you're quite right. I do have big feet. So the shamus gathers up all the debris from the floor, puts it in the tray, and he comes in and he says to the Rebbe, I tried. The Rebbe, he'd heard the whole thing anyway. He says, don't worry, put it down. Tell him to come in. Out goes the shamus, in comes the big chassid. The Rebbe said, are you okay? It's covered in milk stains, coffee stains down his shirt. Yeah, you sure you're okay? I'm fine. Sit down. Take some handkerchiefs, clean yourself up. Are you sure you're okay? Absolutely sure. So after the fellow cleans himself up, the Rebbe said, you've come to see me because you've got a terrible temper, yes? Yes. I didn't see much evidence of that terrible temper a few moments ago when the shamus spilt the tray all over you. So a little smile broke out in the chassid's lips, and he said, well, to tell you the truth, Rebbe, I overheard you telling him to provoke me and to get me to lose my temper. And the Rebbe said, to tell you the truth, I meant you to overhear me. You've come to see me because you think you've got a problem with your temper. You don't. You have a problem with your basic emunah, your basic faith in God. When you overheard me saying to him what should happen, and it happened, and you understood it was me that had engineered the whole thing, designed the whole thing, that I had meant it to happen, you were quite okay with that, because the Rebbe said so. But when the Rebbe of the Rebbes makes things happen to you in your life, and you don't get it, boom, you explode. You don't have a problem with your temper. You have a problem with your basic faith in God. Interesting story, huh? And I think it's very, very apropos. The time of year that we're in, the worst time of year, the 9 days leading up to the bitter, bitter recollection of destruction of the first temple, destruction of the second temple. Any idea how many Jews were killed at the war that ended up in the destruction of the second temple? Does anybody know the numbers? According to Josephus, 3 million. That's half a Holocaust. 3 million Jews. And then, of course, so many other events that run through Jewish history that happened during the 9 days or on Tisha B'Av. Like the expulsion from Spain in 1492, Tisha B'Av. The expulsion from Portugal, Tisha B'Av. And of course, they were only following in the European tradition established by the first European country to expel the Jews. Do you know which country that was? Scotland? God forbid. No, Scotland wouldn't let the Jews in the first place. England. England was the first country to expel the Jews. And then during the Crusades, and the Inquisition, and of course speak to any historian, and they will tell you that the Second World War was only the First World War Part 2, And you know when the First World War started, don't you? And Tisha B'Av. So when we come to this time, and when we think of the incredible horrors of the Second World War, and we think of the present dangers faced by the majority of Jews in the world who live in the land of Israel, then when you think of Ahmadinejad, and you think of Iran, and you think of their puppet, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Sheikh Nasrallah, who said a few years ago that he was a Zionist. Yes, and he meant it. He wants all the Jews to move to Israel so they can finish us with one bomb. And he meant it. So we think about that at this time of the year, it becomes a very important thing. Because you all know that the Talmud says that if you live in a generation that didn't rebuild the temple, we're behaving precisely and exactly as the generation that got the temple destroyed in the first place. That means we've been consistent in our complete failure to undo the mistakes that we made 2,000 years ago for 2,000 years. It's very difficult to know what the source of the problem is. Ask the Chassid. This guy thinks he's got a problem with his temper. No, he doesn't. He's got a problem with his emunah. We seem to have had a problem. I mean, in fact, Rabbi Dessler famously says, a person can go through, this is a scary thought, a person can go through his or her entire life and not know who or what they truly are unless something very dramatic happens to them and they manage to get a glimpse of who and what they are. There's a story about a famous rabbi called Reb Shalom Shvadron. Did you ever come across Reb Shalom Shvadron? Reb Shalom Shvadron, he was the Rabbi of Reb Pesach Kron, so you can find this recorded in his works. I've heard two versions of the story. They're interchangeable, so this is the one I heard. Reb Shalom Shvadron, he was one of these rabbis who travels all around the world speaking. Huge Talmud Chacham, big white beard, and at the end of his life, he was renowned. He's walking down the street in Yerushalayim, in the Shari Chesed area of Yerushalayim. And there was an old Jewish grandmother, a Boba, standing outside her apartment and saw the great tzaddik coming down. And so as he got near her, she nodded modestly, demurely, tzniistically in his direction. He nodded back, demurely in her direction. And at the end of the street, there was a bunch of little boys doing what little boys do best. Dangerous stuff. And they were walking along a wall as though it was a tightrope. And one of the little boys lost his balance and boom! Hit the sidewalk with quite a bang. And the Boba saw that it was her grandson, and she said, "Ah!" And she started to run as fast as she could, and Shalom said, Daiganish, don't worry, it's all sein good, it'll be fine. As she got towards the little boy, she discovered that her old eyes had deceived her. It wasn't her grandson at all. It was his grandson. And she said, "Is nicht meine Enkel? Is deine Enkel?" And Shalom said, "Ah!" And he started, "What happened is all sein good, Gamzulativ, all that stuff." Yeah, that's what you think you think. That's how you see yourself until you find yourself in circumstances, and then you suddenly discover that maybe what you think about yourself or the person that you are is incorrect. And you can get it completely wrong, like the story of the chassid I told you who thought his problem was his temper. No, it wasn't. And here we have been for 2,000 years in this bloody exile. And I'm sure every single person here has come across and maybe has in their own family Holocaust survivors. I just had a new baby granddaughter born in Israel. Thank you very much. And she's called her Lola Rose after her wife's grandmother, who was an Auschwitz survivor. I found it deeply moving to have a granddaughter who is a direct descendant of somebody who survived Auschwitz and is named after them. I mean, it still touches our lives really and poignantly, I hope. And this is something we've simply failed to address properly for 2,000 years. I mean, you can go through your whole life and not know what you really are. A life of 70 years, 80 years, whatever it is these days, 90 years even, and not know who and what you really are. And we have gone through 2,000 years. 2 millennia. And not know who and what we are because we've not managed to get it right. We're still here. As the Gemara says. If you've still got Tisha B'Av in your calendar, then you're behaving exactly like the people. I'm talking about myself. We are behaving exactly like the people who got it destroyed in the first place. It's interesting, as we want to really talk about speech, and as the Rav mentioned before, the idea of Shmiras HaLashon, it's interesting how God defines a human being. According to the Targum, anyway. You all know that Hashem makes a fellow called Adam, and then the Pasuk says, and this is in Bereshis in this base in Pasuk Zayin, V'yetzar Hashem Elokim es ha'odam, Ofra min Adam, he made him from the dust of the earth, V'yifach ba'apov nishmas, and he blows into his mouth nishmas chaim. A nishmas chaim, how would we translate that? A spirit of life? A soul? Something like that? Let me read. Sorry, you're going to say?
A living soul.
You want to say a living soul? Targum Onkelos, the classic commentator, even before Rashi, every Chumash has got Onkelos and Rashi. But Targum Onkelos was an interesting fellow, a nephew of the Emperor Hadrian, the Roman Emperor Hadrian, rabid anti-Semite, and his nephew became a Jew. He was embarrassed. Anyway, so what does he say? Targum Onkelos says, the Chaye, the Nishmas, the Chaye puts into a living, what was your translation? Soul, living soul. B'habaka Adam l'ruach mimalalo. And that meant that this creature that Hashem had created was defined by the fact he speaks. The thing that makes us unique over anything else Hashem created, any other creature, we speak. Speech totally and utterly defines us. Positive speech defines us positively. And the Chofetz Chaim says, in the introduction to his Sefer, I'll be telling more about this in just a second, to his Sefer Chofetz Chaim, he says that the exile was caused because of Sinas Chinam, Jew hating Jew for no reason, and because of Lashon Hara, because we spoke badly. Speech is what we are. That's what defines us. Do it well. Think of words of comfort that you give somebody. When we go to a shiva and somebody's heart is broken, what does it say? What's the halacha? You go to visit somebody in a shiva, what you're supposed to do? Keep quiet. Don't speak. Because at that moment in time, the person might be in such pain that you might say the wrong things. I wrote a book, one of my books that's outside. I wrote a book called A Little Book for Big Worries, Dealing with Serious Illness. And this book, Baruch Hashem, has helped thousands of people. And I just reminded myself, and that's why I brought a couple here tonight, that when I wrote the book, it's a book written for people who are looking after people who are not well. Because you want to do that job properly and not say the wrong things. And I just remind myself that 2 of the chapters in this book that's helped thousands of people address how to speak. The right words can heal somebody and make them better. The wrong words can kill them. Speech is so crucial that if we use this gift that we've been given, this definition of who we are properly, then it can heal. But if we use it badly, so a word of comfort, a word of sympathy, a word of laughter sometimes. The Gemara talks about 2 brothers who got to heaven because they made people laugh when they were depressed. That can be the most wonderful thing. Words of encouragement. Words of you can do this. I believe it. What's the first words that are supposed to pass your mouth when you wake up in the morning? Modi ani. How does it go? Modi ani l'fanecha melech ha'chai v'kayam. I give thanks to you, Hashem. Shachzati b'nishmati. You've given me my soul back again. B'chemlo, with pity. Rabo emun asecha. Rabo emun asecha. Great is your faith. Great is your faith? Scratch my head. Sorry, am I not supposed to have faith in you? Who do you have faith in? He's got faith in you. The first words Hashem wants you to say, to pass your lips, to hear yourself saying when you wake up in the morning is, I, Hashem Yisborach, who made you, who knows you better than anybody else, I have faith in you. And people might have told you through your life that you're no good, that you're a failure, or you're a waste of space. I had many teachers who told me I was a waste of space. You're a waste of space, right? And that really can be incredibly destructive. Or Hashem Yisborach can use words and use your words to tell you no. Hashem, who knows you best, He's got faith in you. We can use words to build. We can use words to destroy. Words are crucial to who and what we are. In fact, this is something the wisest man who ever lived. He lived in a town called Jerusalem a while back. You probably remember him, Shlomo HaMelech. And then he wrote a book called Mishli, Proverbs, they say, translated in English. And here it's in chapter 18. And it says there in Kof Aleph, Moves v'chaim b'yad lashon. Whether life or death, it's all depending how you say the words. Depends on your tongue. You're going to use it positively, you're going to use it negatively. We're extremely sensitive to speech in Judaism. Extremely sensitive. Rabbi Dessler, in his famous Mikta Eliyahu, has got a little essay in page 220 in volume 4. And here it's called Adinus Hadibur. Adinut Hadibur. Any Israelis here? Anybody good at Hebrew? What's Adinut? Refinement of speech. Refinement of speech. What does it mean? He says, Rabbi Dessler says, I'm not talking here about refinement of speech. Doesn't mean that a Jew should never use curse words or swear words, of course. But he tells a story here about, it's a Gemara in Pesachim. It talks about two famous students who were sitting in front of one of the greatest rabbis in history. We don't go into all the details. And we're talking about something, talking about matters of ritual purity. And one of them said, used the word when he was discussing with his rabbi, Tommy. Tommy means what? Impure. And another one said, talking about the same subject, he didn't say the word Tommy, he said, Eine Tohar. What does Eine Tohar mean? Impure. But one of them used the expression not pure. The other one said impure. Impure conjures up nasty images. But not pure, it sort of like softens the blow. He said, I'm sure this person's going to go on to be one of the great rabbis in the Jewish people, and so it was. There's a refinement of speech that Jews are expected to have because words can build or words can destroy. And the Chafetz Chaim said it destroyed at least one temple, second temple. Oh, but it was Sinal Skinim, there was Jews hating. In fact, the rabbis at the time of the first temple, they were fighting with each other and besmirching each other's reputations. This is something which we have struggled with for a very, very long time. But certainly, if you just want to count the second Beis Hamikdash and this bloody, horrible exile, and the rivers of blood, the lakes of blood and Jewish tears, and the seas of Jewish tears that have been imposed on us, then 2,000 years and we have failed. Yeah. There's somebody called Rav Shlomo Wolbe. Did you come across Rav Shlomo Wolbe at all in your studies? Rav Shlomo Wolbe was one of the greatest. It was always one of my ambitions to hear a shiur from him. I had Shabbos with his son in Los Angeles just 2 weeks ago. And I told him, funnily enough, he came, the son, with his grandson. And they're visiting the house that I was staying in. And they didn't know who I was. And so my host said, this is Rabbi Rubinstein, and he speaks all over the place. Even if they don't invite me. Don't speak. No, I'm going to speak. Anyway, so he speaks all over the place. And so, tell us a Devar Torah. On the Sedra, he said. No, I said, I'll tell you something I just saw, which I'm going to tell you later as well, in Rav Shlomo Wolbe. I didn't know it was Rav Shlomo Wolbe's son. I knew it was Rav Shlomo Wolbe's grandson. And they went, oh, and they were jumping up and down. One of the greatest minds, it was one of my ambitions to actually hear a shiur from him, which I never managed. Anyway, I want to read to you something he says in a sefer called Mamori Yemei Rotzi. Listen to this. Habriya kula meuchedes u'medubekas. The entire creation, the entire world, is a very exact and precise creation. And it's so precise and so perfect because, of course, it had one designer who made every single aspect of it. The colony of Rome, Krovim Zelazeh, and everybody in this creation, we're all connected to one another. You know the old joke in Yiddish. If two Jews meet each other for the first time and after 3 minutes they found that they're not related, It simply means they haven't been talking long enough. Every Jew is connected one to the other. Mishpocha achas gedola, we are. Everybody here is not talking Jews, talking all human beings. We're all one big family. Lonu, we, Bnei Adam, human beings. Kriva Eladayim. We have a connection to every aspect of the world, in the world, of the creation. We're connected to the inanimate, are we not? We believe our bodies originated from dust and soil, that's inanimate, so there's a connection there. Shari offer anachnu. We are connected to that which grows from the earth. We grow, our fingernails grow, our hair grows. Hopefully our waistlines don't grow so much, but you get the idea. We also grow. Our connection to living animals, that's much more astute. But that's much more obvious. Have you ever seen somebody who has a dog at home? What happens when they come home to after their day at work and the dog smells or hears them coming? The dog goes. Do you know the phrase bonkers? The dog goes bonkers. The master's coming home. The dog rushes. It's this is my impersonation of a dog. Its tail's wagging like crazy. It jumps up and down. The master or the mistress loves the dog. The dog loves the. We feel a kesher to animals and to dogs. And obviously the connection between different peoples, different nationalities. We're all still human beings, says Shlomo Voma. But in the ancient world, in the ancient world, to be a foreigner was a death sentence. In ancient Greece, there was, I think it was over 200, if I remember, city-states, Sparta and Athens and all the rest, Corinth and so on and so forth. They all looked the same, they're all the same genetic stock, the same racial type, they all spoke Greek. And yet, if you were a Spartan and you went into Athens or vice versa, they would kill you. The difference was minute, but enough of a difference to be killed. Because they didn't have the perspective that we have, that there's one father for every human being on the planet. One designer of us all. Aval cloud is strong. But if that is true in general for human beings, have you ever gone to Israel and you walk down that big pathway when you come off the plane at Lod, and then there's a sign that says for Israeli passports, and it said Zarim. Right, Zarim. What does Zar mean? Strange. Yes, strange. Strange. A bit sinister. Strange. I'm a bit sinister. Okay. The reason that they behaved like that in the ancient world, in Greece and other places, is because this keeps falling off. Thank you so much. I'm just going to pop it in there because it hates me. So the reason that they did that is because they didn't realize that there is one father for all of us. We did know there's no such thing as a foreigner, somebody who's truly strange. And we're obliged to love a foreigner. In fact, there is no mitzvah in the Torah which is repeated as often as loving the foreigner. How many times it tells not to kill people? A couple of times. How many times did it tell you to love the ger? 38 or 48, says the Talmud. It's a debate. That's huge! Because you were gerin. You know what that was like. Yosef Ben Zari says, but much more than that. He quotes a Gemara in Menachos. I'm going to read to you this Gemara just to prove that I'm a fully qualified rabbi. Yava Yedid ben Yedid. Along came somebody who was beloved. He was the son of somebody who was beloved. V'yivna Yedid. And this fellow created a beloved place. Le Yedid, for a beloved person. Bechelkosh Yedid, in a place that belonged to a beloved person. Sounds like the Mishnah's got a stammer here. And people who are beloved could be forgiven for what they did wrong in this place. Good. The Yedid, the person who built the place, was Shlomo HaMelech. So where was the place? The temple. And he was the son of another Yedid, that was Avram Avinu. And the place that was the Yedid, that was the temple. And it was in the place belonging to a Yedid, that was in the tribe of Binyamin. He was also referred to in the in the Bible as a Yedid, as a beloved person. And it would be that the Yedidim, the beloved people, as Jewish people, would be able to find atonement there. Interesting Gemara. Says Rav Shlomo Wolbe, it's telling you the basic nature of Jewish people is we are all interconnected, we're all family. It doesn't really take 3 minutes because the nature of Jewish people, we're all one. And then he says, if that's so, if our basic nature is we're all one, there's a bit of me in you and a bit of you in me, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lezeh, says the Pasuk, we're all one flesh, but my soul in you, a bit of your soul in me. How did we hate each other so badly? When Vespasian's armies marched from the north, which is where they landed, and after a 2-year campaign in the north, moved to conquer Jerusalem, their spy says, don't bother. You don't have to attack. You don't have to sacrifice any Roman lives. The Jews are busy slaughtering each other. There was a civil war going on inside Jerusalem. Why expend Roman lives? Let the Jews kill each other. Jews hated each other with such a vengeance and such a passion, they're busy slaughtering each other. Now, leaving your mother-in-law aside, have you ever disliked anybody in a Jewish family? Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, we're Jewish families, okay. But have you ever hated a Jew so much you wanted to kill him or her? No. Absolutely not. But we did then. And he says, it's the basic nature, a place of a beloved son who was the son of a beloved son, so that beloved people could, beloved? It was not beloving, it was behating. We hated each other. And listen to this. This is so scary. He quotes the Ibn Ezra, and he says the following thing. What's the Hebrew word for cruelty? Do you know? What's the Achzor? Yes, Achzor. Achzor. So somebody called the Ibn Ezra says, the word Achzor, split it up. It means Aleph, Kof, Zar. I will see you as being foreign. In order to hate you, I have to reverse the process. Instead of looking at you as my family, as my people, I've got to look upon you as being alien to me, different to me, foreign to me. Has anybody ever heard of somebody called Franz Stangl? Franz Stangl? Baruch Hashem. Franz Stangl was the commandant of Treblinka. Now Treblinka was a death camp. Auschwitz, we know what Auschwitz was, but Auschwitz wasn't just a death camp. Auschwitz had production going on there. There was a salt mine just outside Auschwitz. Jews were made to work as slaves in the salt mines. Then there was the armaments factory inside Auschwitz. Jews were made to produce munitions for the Germans. Were forced to, I should say. And of course there was the extermination of the Jews happening at the same time. When the Allies were told and plans were smuggled out and what was happening with precise timetables of the railway trains arriving with Jews, the Allies, that's the Americans, the British and the Russians, were given all the information and did not do what they were requested to do by the Jewish resistance, bomb Auschwitz. When the reply came, there was no reply at all from the Russians. The Americans replied at the time that that area of the war was under control of the British, and the RAF, which could have easily bombed Auschwitz, the RAF defied, the only time during the Second World War, defied Churchill's order. He gave an order to bomb Auschwitz, and they refused, and their reply in writing was, we're conducting the war on a strategic and not on a humanitarian basis. But when they heard that there was an armaments factory there, the RAF, the Royal Air Force, flew across and with brilliant precision destroyed the armaments factory, leaving the gas chambers, the crematoria and the railway lines perfectly intact. Franz Stangl was captured by the Americans after the Second World War. And I've read this, at the interview, or rather the examination of this fiend, one of the fellows, the Americans, who was, I mean, you got to, we all know what went on, but this was new, they couldn't understand. American soldiers couldn't understand the incredible cruelty. And they asked him, as everybody there was going to be killed anyway, there was nothing that went on in Treblinka except killing Jews. But Jews were made to do back-breaking work. Break stones, dig holes, just terrible. They were starved. They were reduced to looking like walking skeletons. The permission to use the latrines, when there was hardly any latrines anyway, was often refused. Jews became covered in their own urine and their own feces. They looked repulsive, they stank, and they looked like scarecrows. So they asked him, this was your tactic, yes? Yes. But if they were going to be killed, why did you do that anyway? Why this extra torture? Why not just kill them? And this is what Franz Stangl replied. To condition those who had to carry out the policy, to make it possible for them to do what they had to do. You hear? To condition those who had to carry out the policy, to make it possible for them to do what they had to do. Even one of the most evil people in the history of humanity had to admit, for a Nazi to kill a Jew, he had to stop seeing the Jew as being a human being. Kazar. Cruelty applies when I no longer see you as being me, I see you as being somebody different, somebody foreign and somebody alien to me. So strange. Rav Shlomo Wolbe, I just found this the other week in another one of his forum, and I thought it was so exciting. We argue and we believe passionately that our language, Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language, the language of the Torah, is unique. It's the language Adam spoke in the Garden of Eden. It's the language that the whole of humanity spoke before the Tower of Babel. And we still have it. And it's unique. All other languages are in agreement to call things by certain sounds, but Hebrew, the name that we give to it, is the nature of the thing. For example, if I wrote on the board here W-A-T-E-R, and underneath it I wrote H2O, what have I written? Water. Twice? The difference is that water, W-A-T-E-R, is an agreement amongst people who speak English that that's what we'll call that stuff. And if you are Russian, you call it Vada. And if you're Italian or Spanish, you call it agua. And if you're French, you call it l'eau. And if you're German, you call it Wasser. And you can call it whatever you like. We'll all agree to call it bubbly boop. It's called bubbly boop. Right? But H2O is what it is. Lashon HaKodesh, Hebrew, the nature of the thing is contained in the words. And if you know how to break that up, the nature is revealed to you. Interesting. So, amazing to think that the cruelty of the Nazis is only going to flow from seeing somebody as being different. And there's another word in Hebrew that literally clinches the uniqueness of the language. Shlomo Wolbe says there's a word in Hebrew which you're all familiar with, which is unique in any other language. The word to life. We have a whiskey or a wine, not during the 9 days, and you lift it up. You can have a whiskey during the 9 days, by the way. And you drink it, and you say, L'chaim. Why do we say L'chaim? Why do we say L'chaim? Why is L'chaim, why is Chaim in the plural and not in the singular? Every other word, language, and English is called life, it's not called lives. Right? Why is it in the plural? Because from a Jewish point of view, from a Torah point of view, a life's only a life if it's shared with others. If it's family, if it's community, if it's the shul, if it's Klal Yisrael. That we're Yedidim, that we're all together. Isn't that a wonderful idea? What an incredible idea. And how did we lose that? So, 6 years ago, at this time of year, I was invited, a very great honor, to speak to, I think my largest audience, live audience. When I speak in BBC Radio, it can be 16 million or 60 million, or if it's BBC World Service, minimum audience 156 million people. Slightly larger than the audience here tonight. Just slightly. But it's interesting that my largest audience was 6 years ago or 7 years ago in Yerushalayim. There's a big hall, a concert hall called Binyani HaUmah. Are you familiar with this? And all the classical concerts are played there, the rock concerts are played there. If they can get any rock stars to play there, because of apartheid state, isn't it? Etc., etc. Anyway, they have, during the 9 days, shirim on Shmiras HaLashon, on being careful how you speak. avoiding speaking negatively, Lashon Hara. If I remember rightly, they get 9,000 women who attend the shiurim in Hebrew, and 5,000 women came to hear my shiur when I spoke there as well. And so I stood up there, and the Rav made a joke before, but in actual fact, Rabbi made the same joke, I don't know if you know, a few years before you, and when he said that we would have to admit, this was a bit controversial, we'd have to admit for all the work that's been put in to the mitzvah of not speaking Lashon Hara, we'd have to admit the project has been a failure. So he said, do you think maybe we could manage not to speak Lashon Hara in the morning? Do you think you could manage the morning? How about a couple of hours in the morning? Do you think it was obviously tongue-in-cheek. But it's not so controversial because, as we said at the beginning of the talk, that if you live in a generation that didn't see the temple rebuilt, you're behaving precisely as the generation that God destroyed in the first place. So indeed, for all the work that's been put into Shmiras HaLashon, it's been a failure. And all the Chofetz Chaim's work, and then the Manchester Rosh Yeshiva Zechariah Livrocha, whom I was privileged to be very close to, in carrying on the mission of the Chofetz Chaim, it's not worked! So when I spoke there, I quoted this, and I said, and I want to make a suggestion as to why. For the last 2,000 years it hasn't worked. Because you see, if you're talking about Lashon Hara, and speaking Lashon Hara, and you're dealing with Lashon Hara, and we're already here, and I can hear and see in the show that that's something you take seriously, frankly, you've got it the wrong way round. Lashon Hara isn't the problem. Lashon Hara is a symptom of the problem. The problem is Jews hating each other. If you don't hate each other, you don't speak Lashon Hara. Look, I'll give you an example. Who you guaranteed never to get anybody to speak Lashon Hara about? Your children. Or want to hear Lashon Hara about? Your children. When I was in a yeshiva called Gateshead, I don't know have you heard of Gateshead? Gateshead is what Lakewood is. You've heard of Lakewood, right? What Lakewood is to America, Gateshead is to Europe. In fact, in Gateshead, we think Lakewood is reform. I cracked that joke at Lakewood 2 years ago, and I've not been invited back since. Not being serious. But basically, I went to. I was in Gateshead for 7 years, and in Cuddle for another 3 years, and then I moved back to Manchester, which is where I was before we moved here 8 years ago. And I was teaching in a yeshiva, I was teaching in a Beis Yaakov, girls' school, and in the evening I was working in university campuses, reaching out to university students, which became the formula of my life, more or less. And when I walked into the Beis Yaakov school there was so many faces I could recognize because I knew the parents, because I'd lived in Manchester 10 years before. Anyway, I was teaching there every morning and teaching Hebrew studies, and well, I'm sure it's the exact same here. After the end of the year, it comes to the end of the year examination. And then after the examination, what comes next is writing the end of year report cards. Now there is an art form in writing report cards. Are you aware of this? You see, you have to not write the truth. You have to imply subtly the truth, but not actually write the truth. But you see, I had studied education at Glasgow University, and I was a young man and quite full of myself. And I did not believe in this. I had studied Piaget, the Swiss educational psychologist. I believed in the incredible benefits of telling the parents the truth. You know how it goes, sort of like, sometimes misbehaves in class, set fire to the classroom. Could have tried harder this year, did no work the entire year. No, I did not believe in this. If the girl had not worked, as it has done no work the entire year, if they all consistently misbehaved. The other older and wiser teachers tried to warn me, but I was so full of myself, I was not listening to them. After all, I studied education. And then after you send off the report cards, a week later, what happens? It's the meet the teachers and meet the parents evening. And there I was in the gymnasium, a little chair, little desk with my name, Rabbi Rubinstein, and all the teachers all round about, so they could all come and speak to the teacher about the progress of their child. And I have to tell you how incredibly proud I was of the fact that almost every set of parents wanted to speak to me. I looked to the other teachers pityingly. And then the first couple sat in front of me, they were not smiling, and then the father of the girl leant across the table until his nose was separated from my nose by about 1/16 of an inch. And then he said, "So what have you got against my daughter then? Why do you hate her so much?" And he looked as though he was going to punch me. He was going to punch me. And he wasn't the only one that night. And I remember coming home and I said to my late wife, I cannot believe this. Are these people crazy? Are they off their heads? They want me to lie about their daughters, their children? This was, of course, before I started having report cards brought home by my own children. If any teacher had the audacity to suggest there's something wrong with any of my children, it was obviously an indication that the person was mentally challenged. Or an anti-Semite. Or a mentally challenged anti-Semite. But there's nothing wrong with my son or daughter. Because nobody wants to hear Lashon Hara about their children, because we love our children. And you're certainly not going to speak Lashon Hara even if your child did something wrong. You're not going to tell anybody else. Because it's your child. Lashon Hara is not a problem, it's a symptom of a problem. And if we get to the understanding that we're all family and are able to work on the fact that really there is a bit of you in me and a bit of me in you, that Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lozeh, then Lashon Hara will simply disappear. Of course you've got to deal with the symptoms. If somebody's got a fever and rushes into hospital, of course they've got to get the fever down, because the fever can kill you. But the job of the doctor after that is to try and find out what's causing the fever. It's not Lashon Hara causing itself. Lashon Hara is a symptom. It's because we don't love each other enough. It's because we've forgotten that we're Yedidim and we're all connected one to the other. And really we are all family. That's the problem. That's what we really have to work on. And I have to tell you something else. Now I wrote about this in Hamodia. I've got a column 3 times a month in Hamodia. I thought I was going to be really in trouble over this. Before I tell you that, I've got to tell you something else. Yes, it's been 2,000 years. And for 2,000 years we have been unable to conquer this one. So does that mean that there is no solution? Listen to this. Here is something, you know all this fame, why does a baby cry when a baby's born? Do you know this? Why does a baby, from a Kabbalistic, from a mystical point of view, why does a baby cry? Leaving aside a midwife spanked it in order to clear the lungs and have the little baby. Why do we cry when we're here? We don't want to be here. We don't want to be, we were up there saying, world, no, what about up there with the angels and the harps and all that stuff. However, this is an astonishing thing. Listen to this. This is from somebody called Rabbi Bechaya. And Rabbi Bechaya says, listen, that's quite the opposite of what I've always understood. Every single one of us was created by our agreement and our enthusiasm to come here. Why? Because only by being here do you generate the change that's necessary within you to be able to stay there permanently and return. It's an irony that, of course, we cry when we're here because we don't want to be here, but of course, at the other end of the scale, we cry because we don't want to leave and go back. A bit of an irony there. However, says Rabbeinu Bechaya, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, listen to this. He says from the very outset, he shows you everything that's going to happen to you in your life. Where you're going to be born, who your parents are going to be, who your siblings are going to be, who your mother-in-law was going to be. All the things in your life that you would ever face, you're going to see it. Whether you be rich, he says, whether you become poor, whether you be healthy, whether you're not. You were shown that before you came here. And somebody called the Ramon Pano, who was a 15th century Italian Kabbalist, he says an even more interesting idea. Before you were brought here Hashem took each and every one of us into a room. It's a bit like going into a men's store or a ladies' store that's full of garments. And all the dresses, or all the pants and the suits are on rails, and you look through it and you chose the one that you felt suited you best. This is amazing. You chose this life. You chose to be here. You wouldn't have chose to come here if you were going to fail. You wouldn't have chosen to be in this world, in that family, with all the background and all the difficult times that we all face, if you had not been able to succeed. Klal Yisrael in this generation, that's you and me, would not have chosen to come here at this time had we not been able to succeed in the task that Hashem has set us. And that means beating the problem of not loving each other enough to make sure that automatically Lashon Hara doesn't become a problem. And when I wrote in the Hamadiyah 2 weeks ago, I thought it was going to be a huge explosion from this. Because, you know, when is it very difficult not to speak Lashon Hara? If somebody offends you and somebody upsets you, then it's very difficult not to speak Lashon Hara, is it not? It's bursting. You want to tell somebody. You feel it swelling up in you like a balloon. And and that's when it's very difficult, yeah? So I was working on this and thinking about this a lot, so I want to tell you, I have the solution. This is a very revolutionary share. The next time that happens to you, and you feel you can't control yourself, and you've got to tell somebody what somebody did to you, etc., go ahead. But make sure the person you're telling is Hashem. Tell God. He knows anyway. You're not telling him anything new. But if we really have a relationship with God, like that Chassid, if you really believe in God, if you really believe He's your Tata, He's your Abba, He's your Daddy in Shemayim, Avinu Malkeinu, if you really believe that, who else would you tell? But here's the trick. This is why this is a good shtick, this. Listen to this. You know the classic Musaf Sorim, the ethical Sorim say, you're sitting in yeshiva and you're learning a Black Gemara, and you're really enjoying it. And maybe you think of a question, and gosh, Tosfos on the side, he asks your question. Wow! I thought of Tosfos' question. So you want to read, and suddenly, floating in front of your eyes, is a cup of coffee with steam coming off it. And you can almost smell it. The Sultan wants to disrupt you and wants you to go into the coffee. What are you not supposed to do? You're not supposed to say no. He'll beat you. He's very clever. In fact, the rabbis say he's a Melech Zokin, an ancient and brilliant king who's a great tactician. But he also is a fool. He's a ksil. He falls for his own nonsense. So what you're supposed to say to him is, you know, you're right. I'm going to have a cup of coffee. Going to go and have a cup of coffee. Been half an hour. Half an hour, I'm going to have a cup of coffee. And the strangest thing is, you can try this, the strangest thing is, he will leave you alone for half an hour, and more accurately than the most accurate Swiss watch, 30 minutes later, go, no, the coffee's back. Right? And you might be able to push him off for another 10 minutes, but go and have the cup of coffee. But you learned for 30 minutes. You did a mitzvah you managed to do another mitzvah before you bunked off and had the cup of coffee. I've tried this. The strange thing is, when you're really upset and somebody's done something, and you're bursting to tell somebody, and you do turn around and tell Hashem, you don't feel the need to tell anybody else. You've done it. See, he's just, look, he's an angel. He's programmed. He's what do you call these computers these days? An algorithm, not an algorithm. Yeah, an algorithm. He's an algorithm. He's got to check some boxes. Did you get him to speak Lashon Hara? Yep, good, done. But he's told Hashem. The Prophet actually says this. Actually says this, believe it or not. For those who are interested, it's in Untitled Chapter 10, and it's Halacha 13, and there's a little Haggadah there, and he says that if you're very upset, it's possible that in telling one rov why you're upset, it's therapeutic. Lashon Hara is when you're telling somebody something for no positive reason, something negative that somebody's done, or something negative about something for no positive reason. But if you were to wanted to go into partnership with somebody, and I happen to know that the guy was a thief, that me telling you don't go into partnership, that's not Lashon Hara, because it's got a positive reason. If you're really, really upset, he says, Efsher, possibly there's no Isser of Lashon Hara to go and tell the Rav, your Rav, I'm upset about this. If you go and tell all the Rabbonim in Long Island, oh no, that's just Lashon Hara, you're just having fun. But and somebody called Rabbi Elyashiv, Rabbi Elyashiv is quoted there on that Chofetz Chaim as saying, and if a wife's upset and she comes home to tell her husband why she's upset, don't you be a frummer. None of this, oh no, oh, la 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 la. It's your wife, you've got a duty to listen to her. Because it's not to us, it's therapeutic. Now, some people argue that it's problematic, halakhically, but it's not when you're telling God. If you tell Hashem, that's okay. So I published this. And I was waiting for all the 5 zillion rabbis who read Hamadiyah to attack. Not one. I had incidentally checked this out with a Hasidic Rabbi I'm friendly with, the 2 biggest Rosh Yeshiva in Europe, Rabbi Avram Gurovitz and Rabbi Gero Knopfler, the 2 largest yeshivas in Europe. I checked it out with about 8 or 10 Rabbonim, big Rabbonim in New York and throughout the United States of America. Who else did I ask? And 2 Dayanim. So I protected myself. Isn't this good? So the next time you want to speak Lashon Hara, go ahead. Tell God. And it just relieves you of the need to tell anybody else. You see, what I'm trying to say is like this. If we take the 2000 failed years seriously, if we take the fact that we wouldn't be sent here unless we could succeed and not fail seriously, that means we can do this. There's a way to do this. But it's not just coming to hear a shir. Somebody called Chaim Friedlander, one of Rabbi Dessler's great Talmidim, said you can hear the most exciting ideas you've ever heard in your life and go away and say, wow, that was fantastic. But unless you turn it into reality straight away, unless you act on it straight away, the inspiration, the excitement will soon be gone and you'll forget what it was all about. So how about saying that the Holocaust still is alive and the suffering of the Jewish people still goes on? Anybody who had parents who went through the Holocaust, that was quite an upbringing. And their children will also be influenced. It resonates through the generations to our generation as well. So as this is real to us, as this challenge is real, why not take on to do something serious about it? No, and we're in the middle of the 9 days. Something serious. How about the following? Will I get time to tell you this? Yes. Now I've tried this. This is another one of my, this works. I want you to imagine that you have fallen out with somebody. It could be an old friend that you don't talk to anymore. It could be a family member that you don't talk to anymore. God forbid, it could be a parent or a child that you don't talk to anymore. This is what I would like to invite you to do. I say, I've tried this and it works. I've done it myself. Go from here after we daven Mariv, go outside, and then go home, buy a copy of my book by all means, and then phone that person who used to be a friend or used to be somebody in your family you spoke to, and say the following. Now listen very carefully because you've got to get it exactly right or it doesn't work. You've got to turn around and phone them and say, hello, David, it's me. Now please don't hang up the phone. I just want you to know that I've been thinking about the fact that we haven't spoken together for the last 10 years and why it happened. And I want you to know that I've been thinking about it and it was 100% my fault. No, I know it wasn't 100% your fault. If it was 100% your fault, you should have phoned them long, long ago. And mostly when it comes to a fight, there's a bit of wrong on both sides anyway. But you're going to say to the fellow, it was 100% my fault. And I'd like to come and apologize in person. Now here's my prediction. My prediction is by the time you arrive at their home, and when they open the door, they're going to say to you, it wasn't 100% your fault. It was my fault too. And you might find that you've recovered a brother, a sister, God forbid a parent or a child, a cousin or an old friend. You've got to get it exactly right. Now I have to tell you the truth. I can't give you a 100% guarantee. In fact, I said this once in a shir in Manchester in England, and Yom Kippur, and a fellow phoned me up a week later in a Manchester accent, an older fellow. He said, is this Rabbi Rubinstein? He said in a Manchester accent. I said, yes. I'm furious with you, he said. I said, pardon? He said, I'm furious with you. I said, what? He said, I was in shul at Yom Kippur. I said, yes. And I heard you say that you should phone up somebody you've fallen out with. I said, yes. So I phoned up my brother, I hadn't spoken to him for 15 years. I said, yes. And I said to him, I want you to know it was 100% my fault. And he said, you're dashed right. And he slammed down the phone. So I can't promise you 100%. But I have to tell you, every time I've said this, people have phoned me up afterwards. Last time was in Washington, D.C. 4 people, it was in Yom Kippur I said this, 4 people phoned me up within the next few days to say, I'm speaking to my sister again after 10 years. Was somebody who's speaking to brother after 15 years. And I can't remember the other details. It's showing Hashem that we're taking it seriously. That we're trying to build bridges, reconnect. If the guy doesn't slam the phone down, you tried. You've tried to act in this. Because really, we are all family. Really, we have failed for 2,000 years. We don't have to carry on failing. We wouldn't be here, we wouldn't have chosen this place unless we could have succeeded. The Gemara says God doesn't mess you about. In Hamokim Baba Trinium B'Rosam it says God doesn't give you a test that's too difficult. But maybe we've been dealing with the symptom rather than the cause. The cause is loving each other. That's what we have to work on to make sure this is the very last Tisha B'Av that we'll be having here instead of all together in Yerushalayim, B'Meher, B'Yemen Omi.